Hi, Isabel Litzler, Pleiades HC, the place to be to develop your skills and grow your potential. So on today's Monday Motivation, I wanted to make a quick audio of a presentation I attended a couple of weeks ago. It was done by SUTER, HOWALD. So again, just a big disclaimer on this video. This is not something I focus on, work permits, and I know I do get a lot of questions about how to get a permit, what criteria, etc. So today, what I'm going to give you is basically a sample summary of this presentation that was done by a professional firm called SUTER HOWALD, and I will put their details below. So they're the experts, they're the ones who file for the work permits on behalf of companies or for individuals, but they're the experts. So I'm just someone who's relaying information. I don't handle work permits. I don't have the process with the office to get work permits for individuals, nor can I do it because I'm not an employer. So I'm nor an employer nor a consulting firm that handles work permits. I do career development, so that's my field. Everyone has their specialty. So, so what I wanted to give you is basically the criteria to get a work permit so that you have an idea of whether it's suited for you or not, whether you qualify or not. It saves you time and energy because a lot of people ask me, what are my chances of getting a job in Switzerland? Can I get a work permit? So hopefully after this presentation it gives you more details. So this presentation was basically to give some updates how to get a permit in Switzerland. So I'll start with non-EU, then I will talk for people in Europe, EU people, then about this particular criteria, which is really the detached employer or short-term detached employee or short-term mission that you do in Switzerland, and finally the new trends with this obligation to announce a job. So first of all, the non-EU people. So what does the law say? Again, the presentation was around a legal framework. So what does the law say for non-EU? So there's a legal idea of the economic interest of the country. And I think this is the case in any country where you have the framework of, do we need migrants or not? Well, of course, now there's a huge wave of migrants, but that's for different reasons. That's for war or things like that. This is not what it's about. This is about immigration for people who come for a job, for professional reasons. So the first thing that Switzerland will look at is the interest of the country. Are you someone who's going to bring value? And I said this in my videos before. What value do you bring to Switzerland? So if you're part of these highly demanded, high-tech, artificial intelligence expert, you come from the Silicon Valley, you were working for a big firm over there, you have huge information, you probably get a permit. If you're someone who's more the average professional, probably the chance is lower. So that's number one. That's just the framework to know a little bit where you stand. Now, what I will talk about is how to get a work permit for non-EU. So first of all, it has to be filed by an employer. So you can't yourself ask for a work permit. It has to go through the employer. They're the ones who will apply for you. So, and this is the case for EU as well. So no matter where you come from, the only way you can get a permit is if you apply for a job. Of course, there's the situation of the spouse. The spouse gets the work permit automatically, so I won't even talk about that today. But if you're applying, if you are on your own and you want to work in Switzerland, you need to find an employer. That's the number one thing. And then the employer will need to do a file for you. And in this presentation, they gave the criteria of how the file is built. So the first thing to know is that there's a limit of permits. So if you're an employer, depending on where you are in Switzerland, there's going to be some limitations of permits granted every year. So if you're in a highly demanded place like Zurich or Geneva, the work permit quota is going to ramp up pretty quickly. If you're in a less demanded area, maybe you have more chances, but that's going to be taken into account by the employer. There's also an idea of priority. So you have to show that there's no one available to do the job on the Swiss market before you file for the work permit. And that's mandatory for all non-EU. So for you, in a way, the new legal framework with the votation and the obligation to announce the job with the unemployment office is not going to change much, because it's always been, in your case, non-EU people that you were never priority. So it's not changing much for you. You had to the employer had to show that there was no one else that could do the job anyways. So they will have to do a very intense search on the local market, show that they've done extremely, and that's not just putting an ad out there. And I've gone through the process for on the employer side. You have to show a lot of information, you know, everything about the company, when you were created, how many employees you have, what is the job description, do a letter showing, you know, why you, formal motivation letter of why you need to recruit this person. No one available on the market, you've done dozens of ads, no one replied, etc. Obviously you've done an advertisement with the unemployment office. And if after all this there's no one, then maybe your file will be taken into account. So most of the employers in Switzerland, when they consider bringing someone in from non-EU, they will work through a firm, through a legal firm that will do all this file building for them because it's extremely detailed. So just to give you that as an information piece. Some of the items they will have to show in the file, of course, salary. So if you are going to be, again, if you're not a high-level professional or manager or something like that, you don't fit. I believe the amount is 120,000 Swiss francs. So if you're anything below that, probably your file won't go through, because that's part of the criteria, is a minimum salary, because that gives them an idea of the level of professional that you are. Because, you know, if you're an entry-level junior marketing person, probably your file won't go through. But if you're a senior marketing person with 25 years of experience and you know the industry backward and forward, probably you have better chances. So that's just to give you an idea. So definitely professional, specialist, highly qualified worker with this minimum salary. You also have to show that the employee will have proper housing when they come to Switzerland. That's part of the things you need to prove. So, of course, you know, after reading all this, you understand that it's not an easy thing. What kind of permit do you get? Well, there's 4 levels of permit. So you have a short-term permit called the L. Then you have the typical resident permit that you probably mostly heard of called the B permit. And finally, you have the more permanent residency called the C permit. And finally, you have the frontalier, or the border person. So that would be Germans or French who live on the border. They get a G permit. So that's for non-EU. Now for EU people, I'll list again the names of the countries that were part of the first 17 countries to come into the free flow circulation in Europe. So we have Germany, Spain, Austria, Finland, Italy, Netherlands, Belgium, France, Portugal, Cyprus, Greece, Luxembourg, UK, Denmark, Ireland, Malta, Sweden. So that's since 2007. Those countries are free to come to work. They get a permit easy, let's put it that way to make it simple. Then we have newer countries that were added, some of them 2011. So it's going to be Estonia, Lithuania, Poland, Slovakia, Hungary, Lithuania, and Czech Republic, Slovenia. So these are the newer countries that were added in. Also free-flowing, so you can come and work in Switzerland. And you have countries, Iceland, Liechtenstein, and Norway, also free-flowing and can come to Switzerland. So if you're part of all the countries I mentioned now, you're in good shape, I would say. You have your good chances to find a job in Switzerland and get a work permit fairly easily. Now I'm moving on to the countries where it's going to be a little bit more complicated. So we have some particular cases with Romania, Bulgaria, and Croatia. So these countries are more, they have a quota also, and probably a little bit more difficult to get a permit. So you just have to be aware of that. If you're part of Croatia, for example, there's a clause that was raised that's going to be prolonged until 31st of May 2019 for Croatia. So probably it's not going to be easy to get a permit. So some of the conditions to work in Switzerland for EU people. So you have to give priority to locals. There has to be some conditions on salary. So the dumping on salary is actually not easy when you recruit someone from non-EU, because there's some legal framework around that. You have to take into account the amount of permits available. So this is more for the employer to take into account. This is not your problem. But yeah, that's something to know. Also, anything below 4 months, you have to get a work permit. I mean, if you work less than 4 months, yeah, you can get an authorization to work. So this is bringing me closer to what I'm going to say now about this particular for the 90 days. So before I move on to that, I just wanted to mention same thing for EU as non-EU. You have 4 levels of permits: the short term, the L, the residency permit, the B, and the longer permit, longer term permit, the C, and finally the G, the frontalier border permit. So the 90 days, that's what a lot of people are probably curious about. You know, that's the opportunity for EU person to work in Switzerland. So if you're non-EU, this does not apply to you because it's going to be only for EU people who do a, let's say, a short-term assignment in Switzerland. Also, people who come as detached workers, so you stay with your home country company, but you come, let's say, to work on a project for a couple of months. This would apply to you. So this thing about 90 days was put into place to help, again, if you're a consultant and maybe you come to the office one day every 3 months or something like that, you get this bank of 90 days during the year where you can work in Switzerland without a work permit. So you just have to do an online declaration. I will post the link below so that you know, if you have an employee maybe who wants to have you come to Switzerland but they don't know about this process, you can give it to them. So so yeah, 90 days, if you're a consultant and you only come once in a while, you can still do a lot with 90 days because those 90 days don't have to be taken into consecutive forms, you know, immediately for 3 months. You can come one day here, one day there, as long as you don't go over 90 days. So that part I think will be very good to know for a lot of people, this whole 90 days that a lot of people are not aware of and they think they need a permit. Now moving on to this new obligation to announce all positions depending on the family of jobs. Because there was the votation of limit to massive immigration, the Swiss had to react to this votation. Obviously, it's the citizens that have spoken. So what they did is basically make it mandatory for companies to post a job with the unemployment office. So they have a process to follow, the companies do. And starting January 2020, any place where the unemployment is 5% and above, so that's going to be a lot of places, especially in Geneva, I assume, the unemployment will be higher than that. So they will have to automatically post the job with the unemployment office. So it just brings a little bit more delay for an employer, where before they could just put a job out to the market and get applications. Now they have to first post it only with the unemployment office. And the amount of time is 5 days. So for 5 days, if you don't get any applications, then you can go externally and advertise on job boards. But you have to respect these 5 days of posting with the unemployment office. So what are the jobs that are eligible for this process, basically? There's going to be 2 types of employers. There will be the type of employers that say, I'm only going to post the jobs where it's mandatory, and then I know there's already some multinationals that will automatically post the jobs with the unemployment office no matter what, to be sure, because there's going to be fines that will be given to companies where they don't post the job with the unemployment office. So just to give you an example, so there's 2 categories. Mostly, I would say, we're talking about lower qualification type of jobs like nannies and reception, and people work in construction, people work in manufacturing, etc. So those jobs, you can pretty much be sure you have to post it in the unemployment office. Now you have a few white-collar jobs as well, like marketing, public relations. Actually, those are the ones that usually get a lot of requests from non-EU and EU people, jobs in communications and marketing. So they're going to be tough to get into now with this obligation to search on the local market first. So you can find all this information, of course. I will post the link below. So that's the new thing for you to take into account, is that probably what it means in terms of the expat is that there will be less jobs on the job boards because they will not be posted. I mean, if I'm an employer and I go through the unemployment office for 5 days, chances are we'll find somebody, especially if it's a lower qualified job, and I won't have to actually post on the job board, so you won't even see this job actually anymore. Or maybe the jobs you could see until now, they will not be visible. They will be recruited directly with the unemployment office. So that's the direct consequence for you expats who are listening to this video on how does it affect you. Probably less jobs to apply for because they will be recruited directly from the unemployment office or the local network. I know there's already this trend I can see with employers where they definitely use the local network more also for trust issues and and definitely also because people play the game in Switzerland. Some countries tend to not necessarily follow rules, but it's not the case in Switzerland. People tend to respect votations and respect the legal framework. So if as an employer you're told that you have to do this announcement, first they will do it based on faith and allegiance to the country, and also they will also do it to avoid very, very big fines. So yeah, to end this video today, this information video about work permits, just know that it's going to be pretty much tighter for expats to come to Switzerland based on what I just explained right now. If you're in the highly skilled professions, and you're working for the jobs of tomorrow, which I will make a full conference on, to the jobs of tomorrow in November, probably you have better chances. But if you're more of a general type of qualification that is easy to find, I would say your chances are probably lower, almost impossible. So it's not worth your energy to actually look for a job in Switzerland and get a work permit via an employer. Now, if you're married to someone and you're following someone, then you become a local to some extent, and then it's a different process. So any questions about permits? Again, I'm not an expert. I'm willing to answer as long as it stays basic, but then I will also post the information on the experts here so that you have people to actually help you in case you're right now in the process of getting a permit or your employer is confused, etc. So I hope this was helpful, and I'll talk to you soon. Thank you.